If you have been working hard on your sobriety or recovery, but still feel out of control around food, battling cravings, binge episodes, or using eating to cope with stress or emotions, you're not alone. Many of us in the recovery community have treated food issues as completely separate from our substance challenges. But what if they're deeply interconnected expressions of the same underlying patterns? Today, you're going to discover how food cravings and addictions are often expressions of the exact same challenges we face with alcohol or drugs. You will learn how clean, whole food eating can dramatically impact co-occurring mental health struggles. In fact, a 100% non-processed food diet has effectively eliminated the symptoms of bipolar disorder for me. And many times, there are comorbidities at play in addiction that find their solution in better eating. After all, the brain is the largest consumer of calories, and you quite literally think what you eat. I brought on Amber Abila because I have to be honest with you. I ignored the food piece far too long in my own sober method work. Amber's work shows us that food freedom is not a side issue. It is central to the kind of holistic, sustainable confidence the sober method is designed to create. Please welcome Amber Abila, founder of The Confident Eater and host of Become a Confident Eater podcast. Amber, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me on, Massimo. I'm really excited to be here. And I know there is so much crossover between alcohol and food struggles, and sometimes they can go hand in hand. So I think this episode will be really valuable for a lot of people today.
Yeah, absolutely. Amber, you help people stop binge eating or overeating by rewiring the relationship with food. From your perspective, how are food cravings and addictions connected to the same underlying challenges that people are facing with alcohol or drug addiction? And why have these traditionally been treated as separate issues when they seem so interrelated?
Definitely. So my biggest approach that I take around binge eating is viewing it as just a habit. I think a lot of times in addiction and recovery spaces, it can start to become a very big problem in the sense that it's very complicated to solve. We need to get all our ducks in a row in all of our life in order to stop binge eating or stop drinking. And I don't really believe that's true. Does it help to manage your stress and improve your life? Of course. But if we can view it as just a bad habit, something that our brain has gotten in the habit of doing, it really simplifies things. So I'll go over like what exactly a habit is, and then we can talk about how it applies to both. So a habit is just something your brain has automated to make your life easier. So we forget sometimes that our habits are not there to sabotage us or to ruin our goals. They're really there to try to automate things. So at one point or another, you had a drink or you ate some food and you might have had a little bit too much. But your brain got this reward. With food, it's the reward of lots of sugar, lots of calories, especially if you've been dieting. With alcohol, it's this perception of pleasure and relaxation and all the ways that it impacts your body that way. And so once your brain got that reward, it said, hey, maybe we should do this again. And so it starts sending out cravings for that same situation. So the next time you're in a similar situation, let's say it's 5 p.m. with food and you always tend to binge at that time of night. Next time 5 p.m. comes around, your brain says, hey, wait a second. I know we just did something like this the other day that gave us a reward. Let's do it again. So it sends out a strong urge to do something. We do it and we get the reward. Now, how do we change this? What most people will start looking at is the trigger itself. Most people will say then, okay, if I drink at the bars, I'm not going to go to the bars. Or if candy bars are the problem, I'm just not going to buy a candy bar. That's part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. What we also need to do is look at our urges. When we start to look at our urges, it doesn't matter so much what the trigger is because we've overcome the trigger and can sit with any amount of desire. So that's what I really focus with people on is the urges. Now, the second big piece that I see happening with both food and alcohol that we can dive into more in a minute is with the flavoring component. So natural flavors are one of the 4 most common ingredients in the American food system. And the reason why natural and both artificial flavors too can be a problem is they trick our brain into thinking that something is more nutritious than it actually is. So it tastes a lot stronger flavored than that thing would ever naturally be. And that's also a big addition in a lot of vodka and lots of alcoholic drinks. vodka wouldn't taste as good if it didn't have the strawberry lemon flavoring added to it. So that's another reason that our brain can kind of get hooked on these substances and start to create stronger habits around them too.
Very interesting. So, is it possible you think that we're tying alcohol and food together in this particular scenario? Like, I really love strawberries, so that's why I want a strawberry daiquiri. Or I really like grape, so that's why I will drink UV grape vodka. And then it ties both food craving and the craving that you're getting from alcohol into basically a super amount of things, right?
Yeah, and that's actually a really good question and a theory that I haven't fully considered before of how that would lead into alcohol use too. But that makes a lot of sense because if we were to think about in the wild, thousands of years ago, you were to find an orange on the tree, and that orange gives you vitamin C. And so once that vitamin C arrives in the gut, your brain makes a prediction. It says, if I need the nutrients of vitamin C, I'm going to send out craving signals from an orange. Now, those cravings can be increased when we are hungry or not getting enough of those nutrients. So, if we are not getting enough vitamin C, obviously we're going to have a much stronger craving for orange. Or if we're not getting enough calories in general, we're going to have a much stronger craving for fruit and things that are high in sugar. Now, one place that might come into place around alcohol is a lot of times when people are struggling with alcohol, they are not getting the amount of nutrition that they need from food because it's oftentimes replaced with alcohol. Maybe you go out to drinks and then you barely eat anything at happy hour because you're just drinking, or you don't get as hungry from drinking, or you wake up the next day, you're hungover and you don't drink as much. Sometimes, or you don't eat as much. Sometimes it can go the opposite way though, too, where people they start eating more and then they binge more on the hyper palatable foods, the processed foods that really aren't nutrient dense. So we're still kind of in that same situation where we're not really getting the nutrients we need. But, if we're following this theory, because our brain makes this prediction that the food and the flavor of it will give us the nutrients that we need, I think it would be very fair to say that if we are low in nutrients, especially from fruits and vegetables, vitamin C, vitamin A, all of those good things, that now if we're drinking a orange a mimosa, we don't have the orange juice in it, a mimosa, right? Then our brain is like, "Oh, this is really good," because now it's like this there is true orange juice in it, um, which, if it's maybe real orange juice, maybe not as bad, but a lot of orange juice also still have flavorings in them. You'll look and they still have natural flavors in them. Or it's just artificially flavored things, which is most alcoholic drinks. They taste like things you think of seltzers. There's not actually any fruit juice in them. They just taste fruity. So to your brain, it might be perceiving that as, oh, this thing is actually very nutritious. It's almost like this really nice fruit juice that I'm getting right now, but there's not actually that fruit juice in it, and it's not a good source of nutrition. So that drives up our engagement from it. And that would be actually, you've really got me thinking now of if someone is drinking a lot of those beverages, they love seltzers. Every weekend they have, you know, 3 or 4 seltzers on Friday and Saturday. What that can do is it actually starts to change our taste buds. So the next time you go into eating a watermelon and you've had this ultra strong watermelon flavor, the watermelon actually tastes worse. Why is that? That's because if your brain says, well, I just tasted something that was really strong watermelon flavored and it had no watermelon nutrition, I must need an even stronger flavor if I want that same nutrition. So it makes it so that the next time we have the actual real watermelon that does have the nutrition, it doesn't perceive it as nutritious. And that's a big problem of what's happening in our country and just in general when we struggle with food is the healthy food starts to taste worse because we're so used to the hyper palatable food. I like to think of things like flavor blasted goldfish. We used to just have normal goldfish. Now we have pizza flavored blasted goldfish. So, of course, the normal goldfish tastes boring now because our brains are thinking, wow, these ones must have the nutrients of pizza in it. So it drives overeating on the hyper palatable flavored things and not as much overeating and cravings for the things that we actually need in our bodies needs for nutrition.
Yeah, so wildly, what I just suggested theoretically becomes possible because if you had an orange flavored vodka, let's say, and it tastes better than an actual orange, you're going to crave the vodka over the orange, and thereby you're driving two problems at the same time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it makes it seem more palatable to our brain. It makes it like double hooks it on that thing because now it not only is getting the artificial hit from alcohol, but also the artificial hit from the flavoring. And cigarette companies know this. Cigarette companies have actually been known as flavoring companies because they've learned that if they add certain flavorings to it, it will drive up usage. We saw this a lot with vape products, all of the different flavors and things with that, and how kids were using it more because it tasted better. So to their brain, it was like, wow, this thing has nutrition in it. It's a very normal response for our brains to have, but that can definitely make a substance a lot more addictive too, because not because you're broken or you're incapable of having these things, but because of how our brain is wired for survival and trying to get nutrition in when most of us are very deficient in nutrients and the things we need.
Wow. So you use a lot of tools in you've approached eating from a very neuroscience methodology, and in your work, if I'm not mistaken, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you use a lot of cognitive behavior tools and some practical mindset to help rethink the relationship with food in a way that is not, well, it's pretty similar to exactly what I suggest in the sober method. I wonder if you could take me through what are the starting points for someone that is using your program?
Yeah, so I definitely take that approach with more cognitive behavioral therapy tools, which is essentially just questioning our thoughts. So, one of the biggest aha moments I had around food was when I started questioning if my desire and urges to binge were true. What would happen is every single night, I would get to the end of the day, and it felt like I would literally die if I didn't binge. I thought that I needed chocolate. It was so important for me to eat it. My life was going to be filled with pain and no pleasure if I didn't get my fix. And I knew logically, like, okay, I don't really need it. But I really had to start questioning, like, would my life really be so painful if I didn't binge right now? And I would journal on that. And it'd be like, well, no, actually, my life would be significantly better in so many ways. And I would write down those ways. And is it really true that I'm going to die right now? And I would tell myself, no, I am safe. I'm going to be okay if I don't binge and I eat all this food right now. Part of that was making sure I wasn't restricting during the day because if you are dieting and you are not getting enough food, your brain has a hard time believing that it's not going to die because if it doesn't binge. Binge eating starts for 99% of people from some form of restriction. There's some sort of dieting involved, some sort of cutting out a lot of food groups. Anytime we do that, that sends our brain into survival mode and it thinks food is disappearing off the face of the planet Earth. I better eat as much of it as I can right now before it goes away. Right? That makes sense, but we don't really need that in our modern day environment. So if we are restricting, those urges will get stronger. But yes, asking myself, is this true? Right? Is it true that I need to binge right now? Is it true that I can't handle this urge? Is it true that it's going to be the most uncomfortable thing I ever experience? Probably not. And so a lot of that questioning really helped me unlearn, some of these beliefs that I was taught around um, my capacity to sit with discomfort, my capacity to not binge. And really, what I wanted to do was to see binge eating as not pleasurable and not fun, and starting to question my thoughts and asking, is that true? Really helped with that. Something else that really helped me was starting to visualize the life that I wanted to have. And this is something I will give your listeners in the show notes. It is my guided audio to stop a binge. I so desperately wish I had this when I was going through my journey, just someone to kindly and compassionately remind me you don't want to binge. So it's something you can just pop into your ears and it will walk you through exactly what urges are and how to sit with them. One of the tools I walk you through in that, though, is visualization. And visualization is a very powerful tool that's used by CEOs, executives, athletes all over the world. I really wish more people talked about it because you would achieve your goals 10 times faster, if not more, if more people did this. So all visualization is creating a very clear image in your brain of really anything, but usually how you want to be, what your goal is. The reason why this works is because your brain does not know the difference between something you imagine in depth and the reality of what happens. This is why you can be arguing with your partner the whole way on your drive home and you get home and you blow up on them and you're so mad at them. That argument never happened, but to your brain, it did. So it's really important to check in on what we're visualizing, what we're noticing. They've done studies on people who have played piano for a month and then imagined playing piano for a month, and they had similar improvements in their piano playing skills, even though the other person never touched the piano. So it's a really, really beautiful thing that we can use. And what we're doing with visualization is giving your brain a blueprint. It's giving it the map of here's how we want to be. And it's almost like having a future memory of your life, of the type of person you want to be. That can also help you be more comfortable with this new self that you're creating. If you've been binge eating, struggling with food, alcohol for a long time, to your higher brain, you know logically that this is where we want to go, but to your lower survival brain, it feels a bit unsafe. It feels like, I don't know, because this is all we've ever known. We've been binge eating for the last 10 years. What will life be like without it? So, visualization can also really help you start to become comfortable with that new version of you ahead of time and kind of step into that version of you to say, okay, I feel safe and comfortable not binge eating tonight or not going to the food. And I'm sure you can apply that audio too. I talk a little bit more specifically about food, but I'm sure you can apply it to alcohol too and getting through cravings around that.
Absolutely. And what you're talking about is in the execute step in sober method is setting out your plan, looking at things, visualizing how you're going to be, seeing that next day as a sober day, etc. So we talk about the same types of things. But when it comes to behavior, do you have something that what have you found most effective from moving from what is really chaotic or addictive into something that feels more controlled and confident? And we both talk about tapering off or not attacking it all at once. I often find that the best way is tapering off alcohol, not saying go cold turkey, quit. And I think that you kind of say the same thing in your confidence boost with eating. So how do you structure that? How do you encourage that behavior shift?
Yeah, I don't have a preference if someone is like, I am ready to cut this thing out of my life, whether that's processed sugar or, more processed foods in general. But I do agree with you that I think it does make it more approachable and a lot easier to taper it off. But how I think the big thing here is the mindset shift. It's not we're cutting things out, we're tapering off, even though that, yes, that's what we're doing. But I like to think about it as how are we adding more back into your life? So you can think about this as actual actions of what you're adding back in. So maybe when you eat less food, you add in more walks or you add in more time having fun TV episodes on it. Like it doesn't have to be the most productive thing in the world. It can just be something that's enjoyable. You can be adding in more fruits, more vegetables when you're tapering off of some of the processed foods. So you can think about like the actionable things that you might be adding in, but also just more of the untangible things that you're adding in. Where when we are tapering off of overeating and lots of processed food and sugar, what we're adding back into our life is energy. What we're adding back into our life is peace, calmness, not having that anxiety anymore. No more food noise or stress and constant thinking about it. Feeling regulated in our hormones and being able to sleep well at night and function well during our workouts. Those are the things we're adding back in. And that's a mindset shift that makes things easier. So I could give you guys like actionable strategies and some things, and I'll mention some of those, like putting your food on a plate ahead of time, right? So instead of just standing up and eating the chocolate chip cookies out of the bag, putting one on your plate, deciding the portion that you want to have can be a big help with that. This is actually something I did the other day. I bought like these healthy cookies and I thought they were healthy. I just kind of glanced at them and I put them in my cart. And then I realized that it was 2 servings in this one cookie and that in the whole cookie, there was 18 grams of sugar. And that might not seem like a lot, but like I don't really eat processed sugar anymore. I just don't really want to. It's not even a rule I have. I just don't really desire it. And I ate one of these cookies the one day and I felt horrible. And so the next day I had another one, but I really made sure I portioned it out ahead of time. So I literally took a third of the cookie out of the package. I put it on my plate and then I put the rest away to help my brain like not have to make that decision. Because if I'm like halfway through my bite of cookie and I'm like, okay, now it's time to stop, it's a little bit harder. So that's one of the actionable things that you can do is like really like plating your food, deciding ahead of time how much you want to have of that food. But it's really the mindset thing that shifts here. And the biggest mindset shift is going away from what am I giving up here to what am I gaining? Because every time we say no to something, we're saying yes to something else. So when we say no to that full cookie, what am I saying yes to? I'm saying yes to having more energy through the rest of the day, to not crashing, to not having anxiety, because those are always big things I notice. And I'd be fascinated to hear your story too with the bipolar and the food, because I notice a huge impact on my mood based on the food I eat. And so that's what I'm saying yes to. And then it makes it feel like I'm not really cutting anything out. I'm really just getting what I truly want.
When you mention cutting everything out and changing to all non-processed foods, it was the most amazing thing. And it happened kind of in steps. I got to about a quarter and, that was pretty easy to get to a quarter of my food intake. But cutting it down to having absolutely no processed foods, the clarity of mind is the most amazing thing. And what ended up happening to me is I didn't even realize that I wasn't taking my medication anymore. I just one day I noticed that I hadn't refilled the prescription in like 4 months, and it was because I didn't even think to take it in the morning anymore. That's how it just kinda naturally happened, and then I talked to the physician and he's, "Okay, well, I mean, if you don't think you need it, you don't have to take it." And so it's been a year now, more than a year. It's just really incredible, but the clarity of mind, and you mentioned sugar. I made the mistake of celebrating someone's birthday here recently by having a piece of cake at a party, not even stopping to think about the amount of sugar. And it's graduation season too. I've said no to a lot of people at graduation parties. No, sorry, can't have that. But I had this cake. I felt horrible the rest of the day. And then the following day, I was depressed. And I hadn't felt depressed in, I can't even remember the last time I felt depressed. It had to be that sugar. It had to be the processed whatever was in that cake yesterday because there was nothing else that was outside of my normal diet. And it really led me to believe that this is a true thing that I need to focus on and really bring into all the other work that I'm doing with people that are fighting for their sobriety, because sobriety is really the holistic look at the whole body. And without involving food in this exercise, I think I'm doing a disservice to everybody that I'm trying to help get sober.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
that's a lot to take in.
I love hearing your story because it is such a beautiful thing when people change their relationship with food, but sometimes people feel restricted or deprived. And we're not really depriving ourselves from anything if it's making us feel good, right? Deprivation is only happening if we're taking away something that does feel good. And when we really look at it, like eating that chocolate cake might feel good in the moment, but does it make us feel good in the coming hours and days? If not, then it's not really a true pleasure. So we're not actually really restricting or depriving ourselves of anything.
We're actually playing defense. We're doing the right thing for our body, and our body rewards us by being happier all the time. Could you walk us back and tell us a little bit about your own journey with food and eating and the personal turning point that led you to create the Confident Eater to begin with? What is the genesis of this body of work you've created?
I struggled with every type of eating issue, from full blown like restriction, eating 1,000 calories a day for months, to binges of over 5,000 calories in a sitting and everything in between. I also struggled with bulimia for a time period, purging and throwing up. And so I feel like I always tell people, like, there's nothing you can say that I haven't heard, I haven't done. Like, all, within my realm of things that I've dealt with and have helped other people with. And really, my journey started by calorie counting, and it seems so innocent. Most people who want to lose weight, they think it's an innocent journey to go on. It's just calories in, calories out. I'm just going to eat less, move more, and I'll lose the weight, and it will be simple. And then when you start going down that journey, you'll realize it can get a little bit complicated along the way at times. So after a period of really restricting my calories, tracking everything in my fitness pal, I started to get really obsessed around food. And for a while, I just controlled it. I kind of just like white knuckled and willpowered my way through it. But I was thinking about food all the time. I was constantly hungry. I was obsessed with cooking recipes and like making food for other people because I didn't want to eat it, but I was like, I want to watch someone else eat it. And so I really had all of these disordered eating behaviors that were starting to come about. But it wasn't until I had my first binge one day that all the reins kind of broke loose. It was around Christmas time. I went downstairs and I promised myself I was just going to have one cookie. And that one cookie turned into another and another and another until I'd eaten like 8 cookies. I was so ashamed. I promised myself it was never going to happen again. I was going to get back on track tomorrow. And I did for a couple days until a couple days later it happened again. And then it happened more and more and more until I was binge eating every day. And everything I told was told from online or from therapists just wasn't really working for me. And so that's when I really started blaming myself. I started thinking, well, maybe something is just wrong with me. Maybe I'm the problem. No one can really help me. I would tried everything from, just therapy and looking at my past. I tried intuitive eating, just allowing all the foods back into my life. And I do use some aspects of intuitive eating in my coaching. Like, I wouldn't say any of the things I tried were like fully wrong, except maybe like the extreme calorie counting. But like all approaches kind of have something valuable about them. So I do teach people how to listen to their hunger and fullness, but in a much different way than intuitive eating does. I tried intermittent fasting. I tried cutting out sugar, but the cutting out sugar was like very hard and strict. It was like, I'm not going to eat sugar for 30 days. It wasn't like, even though I don't really eat sugar now, it was a much different mindset of strict and, cutthroat, and we're not having any, just like really ridiculously strict. So all of these things I was trying, but nothing was really working. And so I had to go out and started to research how our brain forms habits on our own. And that's where I got a lot of these insights around cognitive behavioral therapy and questioning our thoughts and seeing how habit loops form, really seeing the urges as what they are, as just like this brain junk that your brain develops that you don't need to listen to. That's not really true. It's just an old record playing. It's not really valuable information and you don't need to act on it. It was really through a lot of my own research, a lot of accumulation of all the different approaches that I tried, that I created the Confident Eater program. And I started it mainly because I knew that I didn't want anyone else to be as alone as I felt. It's very easy when we're in addictive habits, eating disorders, all of these things to tell ourselves that we're broken, that this is embarrassing, that it's a shameful thing to do. And, unfortunately, some of the world does shame these things, especially around weight gain, both men and women. It's really hard to admit that we're struggling with our weight, that we're struggling with food. But what you'll realize is that so many more people than you can ever imagine struggle with these things. And it's unfortunately very normal because of diet culture, based off the way our food is engineered, based on how normal alcohol is in our society and how they engineer alcohol and add all these things to it to also keep us hooked. So when you look at the systems that have been placed against us, it's like, oh, no wonder so many people struggle with this and I'm really not alone.
It's really amazing to see how we do so well in spite of ourselves, honestly, when you take it all into account. If we look at this transformed relationship that you then had and look at how you lay down confidence, how does that play into it? How do you structure it? Or does it just naturally happen over time that you gain this confidence because you see what has happened?
So confidence is the trust that we have in our ability to do something. When you don't trust yourself around food, you don't trust that you're going to act in a way that you want to be acting around it, that you're going to act in line with your values. So, the more that we can start to eat in a way that we want to be eating, the more our confidence builds in ourselves that, yes, this is something that I can do. Now, as far as our overall confidence goes, like our body confidence, for example, how well we feel in our body, that's something that I find almost naturally builds as people stop binge eating. And it is something I address with clients because it is a big component of it. But the thing is, when you are binge eating and overeating, you're probably at a natural weight that's higher than your natural weight. Like where you are right now is not necessarily where you're going to be forever. So some people will naturally start to lose weight without even trying because they're just working on healing their relationship with food. And that helps to stop binge eating. And then you're not eating so much. So it starts to stabilize your weight or lose weight a little bit. So sometimes that can help. But I also find that what would happen for me is after a binge, I would take out all of my anger on myself, right? Of how frustrated I was that I did this habit again, how angry I was that I couldn't just like get my shit together and eat normally. And I'd take it out at my body. And I'd say, my body is too big. It's not good enough. I would start to look in the mirror and I'd imagine myself like I was 30 pounds more than I was because I was so guilty, ashamed. And I'm sure there was some bloat involved in there too. Like there is some physical things that happen after a binge. But it was like I almost was trying to punish my body and feel insecure about myself to try to motivate myself to change. That never
Mhm.
worked. What would often happen is I kind of feel good in the moment to like beat myself up and just tell myself like how horrible I was and how ugly my body was. But then the next day I'd be feeling even worse. And that would just lead me to having a binge all over again. I would just say, who cares about if I binge? I already don't care about myself anyways. I'm already getting ugly and fat. So, like, let me just keep binge eating. These are the actual thoughts that went through my head. So, with body confidence, when people stop binge eating and they start to build that trust around food, I found that my body confidence naturally started to improve. One, I wasn't as bloated anymore. A lot of my inflammation went down. My face wasn't as puffy. But I also just started to feel like I can trust myself. And anytime we're gaining skills in a new area, it starts to build that confidence. I'm taking ice skating lessons right now. And I remember driving home after ice skating, and I was like feeling so confident and proud of myself because I had just done something that felt hard and difficult. And I've seen myself improving. So, like, anytime we can do something where we can allow ourselves to see self growth and improvement, that helps us boost our confidence.
That's hilarious that you say that because figure skating became a huge component in my long-term sobriety. So
Oh my gosh.
I, yes, I'm very proud of you for getting out on the ice. I started skating 4 years ago. I'm a competitive figure skater now. It's pretty wild. I love it. I absolutely love it. So keep doing it if you're enjoying it.
I am. I'm pretty beginner and new to it. But yeah, finding a hobby in something like that, I think, as you probably notice, just helps you get this like greater sense of purpose back in your life outside of your addiction. And I think that's so important because when you struggle with these things for so long, it can just feel like such a part of your identity. Like, I'm just someone who struggles with alcohol. I'm just someone who struggles with food. And especially people who have been dieting a long time, like, dieting has become their only hobby. All they know is their thoughts 90% of the day are just consumed with what am I going to eat tonight? What did I eat last night? Was I good enough today? What's the latest research on food? It's just like all consuming all the time. So then when you start to change, that can kind of feel like, I don't know, it's kind of empty up in my brain. I like have so much time back. And so it's really fun to see like what I want to do at that time. Do I want to become a figure skater? Do I want to take a dance class? Do I want to start painting? And like your life just expands so much more. And that starts to create a really positive feedback loop where like the more you do of those things, the more your identity is outside of your addiction. And then like the less you want to go back to the substances, the overeating, the food, all of those things.
Absolutely. Amber, that's really powerful. And it definitely does adapt to the new people that you meet along the way. And when you make those new friends, especially when you're dealing with alcohol and drug addiction, you want to get away from your old friends. It's very important that you do that. And so getting those new hobbies in different places really solidifies all of that. Here's a sober tip I want every one of you to take this week, inspired by Amber's The Confident Eater work. So observe one moment today when a food craving or emotional eating urge shows up. This might be during stress, boredom, or into the day wind down. I want you to catch it in real time. I want you to name it without judgment on yourself. Then I want you to, in behavior, pause and choose one small intentional action aligned with how you want to feel. And this could be go take a short walk, grab a glass of water instead, or simply sit with the urge for a couple of minutes. You'll find that it will change. And execute that new response at least 3 times this week. And note what happens in your journal. Remember, journaling is so important here. Notice the difference between staying stuck in the old loop and stepping into awareness and momentum, because that's how we expend our flavor of confidence to include food. Clean, intentional eating can quietly transform both sobriety and mental clarity. So, Amber, we have a tradition on this podcast where each guest answers a question from my last guest and then leaves one for the next. Steve Barton left you this question. What is your purpose? What is your passion? And why do you do the job that you're doing? And why do you do it so well?
I shared a little bit about this that I really think my purpose is to make people feel less alone in this, and to give them a new method, one that like they might have not tried before. I think so many people think they've tried it all when they went to a therapist for 6 weeks. You haven't tried it all, okay? And I know it can feel frustrating when you're wasting time and energy and money on things that haven't worked, but it's usually just leading you along the path to the thing that will work for you. And I tell every single client this on my very first call. I say, as long as you don't give up, this will work for you. And I 100% full heartedly believe that. And every client that has lived by that motto has gotten to where they wanted to go. It might take longer than you expected sometimes. It might be harder than you expected, but like truly, if you don't give up, you are going to get to where you want to be. I think that's with any goal in life. If you start a business and you do it long enough, your success is inevitable. You're gonna figure it out in some way. It might be different than you imagine. You might come to some bumps along the road where you really need to adapt in new ways you never thought you did. But I truly believe with anything, as long as you stick with it, you'll get to where you want to be. Most people just give up long before that. So that's, I think, my passion, my purpose. Why I think I'm so good at what I do is because I have been there myself. There's a lot of mental health professionals out there that are amazing, but most of them haven't struggled with binge eating and come out of it the same way that I have. And I think that's why a lot of clients really relate to me and really enjoy working with me, is because I'm always there to share personal stories, tips, things that I've noticed, things I've helped other clients with that they've noticed. And I think that just helps you remove the shame from it, remind you that you're not alone, but also like really trust that, like, hey, if this person has done these things and come out of it, maybe I can too. And that really gives you hope for a different possibility of what your eating habits could look like in life.
That was a fantastic answer. Well, now it's your turn. What question are you going to leave for my next guest?
I would love to know what was their rock bottom moment and how they got out of it using a very first step.
Okay, fantastic. I look forward to hearing that answer. Amber, you get the final minute. Any words of wisdom for the listener who feels the weight of hidden food struggles?
One, you're not alone. I've said that a couple times, but I cannot say it enough. You are not alone. And don't be afraid to talk about these things, whether it's, with a trusted partner, with a friend. Reach out to me. Feel free to message me on Instagram. If you get on my email list, respond to those emails. I will always respond back to you. But when we can start to talk about it, it also releases some of the stigma. But really, if you can be the vulnerable one and share with your friends, hey, this is something that I'm working on, or share with your partner. So many people are secret eating and hiding it from their partner. It's not that weird. Of course, you want your partner to view you in a certain light, but that can be a moment of connection to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this thing, and I just want you to know. Because I find that's also what prevents a lot of people from getting support. And especially around food, we kind of have this belief sometimes that, well, we're just supposed to know how to eat, right? Like we've been eating since birth. Like this is something I'm just supposed to know how to do. But we are not usually taught positive eating habits by our parents, by society. And we live in a very diet obsessed culture. We live in a very highly processed, highly addictive food culture. And so it makes sense that you need to relearn how to eat, and you need to learn how to eat in a different way. So even though it's not going to be a brand new skill, it might be something that you have to relearn in a new way. And that is totally normal. So giving yourself permission to be a beginner at this, to feel like you're bad at eating and don't know how to do this. That's okay. That's normal for a lot of people. But if you stay stuck in secrecy and shame, you're not going to get help. And that makes it so much harder to get out of it without that support when there is people who have gone through this and have the path out.
Well, thank you, Amber. That was amazing. To everyone listening, keep observing your own behaviors. If you're not already journaling, I want you to start today. A free guide is available in the show notes. I'm Massimo Rigotti. This is the Sober Method Podcast. Please follow, like, subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone who needs to hear it. Remember, everyone, your future is sober.